Salam, merhaba. My name is Sonia Tamar Seeman. I'm an associate professor of ethnomusicology in the Butler School of Music and the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. Welcome to Middle Eastern Music and Culture Office Hours. Ethnomusicology is a field that was established in the United States in the 1950s. It is a field that combines anthropology, ethnography, and the study of music. We are interested in what it is music does and how music makes us human and the social aspects of music. Initially, the field began by studying musics that were not part of the Western European canon or not studying popular musics, but now our scholars are all over the place. We're interested really in the issues of how music makes us human. Music tells us about how human beings work, and it is musicking, as one scholar put it, Christopher Small, musicking, which is the practice of being involved in music, whether you're listening or dancing or working out or playing. We're all involved in musicking. Musicking is so ubiquitous in all societies, actually, that we've encountered, that we know it's absolutely fundamental to what makes us tick. In various classes that I teach, we look at the ways in which music carries ideas and enables us to feel solidarity with others, or how music then marks distinctions between people who are marked as different races or different ethnic groups. We also look at how music is an agent for social change. Music also gives us a feeling of being and belonging, often surpassing ourselves. So any musicking that you're involved in and care about, there's a way to study it through ethnomusicology. Primary instruments in Middle Eastern music, I have a few here. This is just a small taste. One that you may well be familiar with is the great-great-great-great-grandfather of the guitar, which is an instrument called oud, which comes from the word wood. And this is one of the oldest instruments. It has a large belly and unfretted courses of strings. That's a very typical instrument found as far south as North Africa and all the way into areas of southeastern Europe, such as Albania. Other instruments would include various kinds of drums. I have one example here of a frame drum with jingles. This in Turkey is called daire or def, and this particular drum was made in the style of Roma or gypsy professional female musicians who would perform through singing. They would do dance songs using nonsense syllables while playing this kind of drum. So this was patterned on that style. You'll also see these frame drums of various sizes, sometimes without these jingles. This other instrument I brought is called a kanun, and kanun literally means law. In some ways, it is the lawgiver of the ensemble. As you can see, there's many levers here which change the pitches. And one of the characteristics of music throughout the Middle East are the very distinctive tuning patterns and the use of what's called microtones, that is, pitches that are smaller than a half step. So to hear what that sounds like, here's an example. And each lever I move is going to change the pitch by 24.48 cents, which is 1/9 of a whole tone. As a result, the musical systems throughout this region are extremely rich. Although there's not a tradition of triadic harmony that was introduced from Western Europe, the older traditions focused on these linear lines or melodies. And there are, for example, in the Ottoman Turkish system, 254 different melodic modes. So you can see if every set of pitches can be changed, there's a great deal of variety there. Another instrument is this. You might recognize this as the clarinet, but in fact, it's called clarinet or granata in Southeastern Europe and Turkey. And you'll notice that it has fewer keys. It's also much longer than the standard B-flat clarinet that you would see in symphony orchestras and bands. They also play it with a very soft reed because you have to be able to play these microtones. So I'll give you an example of what this instrument sounds like. So in a sense, even though the instrument originally came from Western Europe in the early 19th century, it was quickly modified to be able to play Ottoman Turkish music. So that was an example of what we would call a taksim, which is a improvised introduction that's designed to warm up the audience's ears to the mode and the maqam. And then normally there'd be a series of pieces that would be played in that mode. So you can tell, even though it looks like a clarinet, it actually has got a very different kind of sound because of the style of music and the aesthetics in the communities there. That's a great question. Dance is considered to be part of a social obligation. When you go to a wedding or a circumcision ceremony, a name day ceremony, hair cutting ceremony, all these different ceremonies, part of this, of course, part of sociality is moving with others to music. Now, every community has its own set of rules about who can dance when and what kind of dance to do. I can draw on my experiences with Romani or Gypsy communities. I've been working with Roma communities since, since the 1980s in Southeastern Europe, and then in Turkey since the mid-1990s. And what I've experienced in this is you are obligated, if you're invited by a family, you're expected to dance with that family. What happens during the ceremony is that there's a list of who's expected to get up and dance, and particularly the women get up and dance. They're wearing their best clothing, they get their hair styled, and they dance according to their status. So married women dance in a much more restrained style, except for when I've seen them party at home and then they really just bust out. Unmarried women, girls, in that age range from 13 till about 18 or so, will do bigger movements and gestures. They'll be facing each other in a circle, but they know that the mamas out there are watching because they're trying to figure out who would be a good match for their son. So for the most part, marriages are still pretty much arranged. And again, there's a series of new kinds of moves that are being incorporated. For example, young girls will do twerking as part of their dance moves, although it's very much within the style. So they have a rhythm among Romani communities throughout Western Turkey. This is a 9/8 rhythm, and it does involve belly movements, but fairly restrained. Whereas the girls will be busting out and kind of dancing across at each other, doing gestures like, I dance better than you, which is kind of friendly, but also competitive. There's another gesture, which is, I'm well fed, I'm taken care of. Another one that comes from the agrarian movements, it's from hoeing, and it's done within this. It's this kind of pulling across the body. What's another one? Oh, this one, which is, I have gold, right? See how many gold bracelets I have. So there's a rich variety of movements by which an individual shows their status, their history, but also by dancing together with the other female relatives in their family, they're showing their family's power. So there's a lot of social play, as well as status and prestige and joy that's conveyed through dancing. Yes, all the time, I would say. One way to think about this is, especially the Ottoman Empire was a very powerful administrative body that spanned over 3 continents and 800 years. And through the urban networks, people would travel and they'd pick up a tune from one place, bring it to another. Another example would be Sufism, a mystical branch of Islam. One of the ways that Sufi leaders had of encouraging people to convert was they'd take a local melody and set an ilahi, or a religious poem, to that melody. There were also folk theater groups that picked up a tune and traveled it throughout the Southeastern Europe all the way through the Middle East. One classic example is a tune that Eartha Kitt ended up recording called Üsküdar'a gider iken. Üsküdar'a gider iken, la 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 la, which was created in the latter part of the 19th century when there was a Scottish bagpipe troupe stationed in Üsküdar in Istanbul during the Crimean War. That tune took hold and then was set by, we don't know who, but used as a theatrical song to make fun of the new dress reforms that were ordered by the Sultan, where they had to wear a fez, they had to wear a frock coat. And so they changed the words to, oh, my secretary, my handsome secretary, don't you look fine in that frock coat of yours? And that tune, through various theatrical performances, traveled as far east. It's known in North Africa, it's known in Egypt, it's known all the way into Southeastern Europe, both as an ilahi, as a religious hymn in Albania, but also as a Macedonian language song. Oh, you girl, you beautiful Macedonian girl. So that's one example, and this is the 19th century. Now, of course, tunes really travel in very interesting ways. I heard at a friend of mine's wedding, a Greek clarinetist performing a tune that originally was a Sephardic Spanish song called Los Bibilicos, which was about the nightingales and how they're forced to go from one place to another. It's a metaphor for the Jewish diaspora. And then the next year, I heard so many of my Romani friends in Turkey playing that melody. Like it just took hold again. So here is a really old song that was popularized at a wedding by a Greek Roma clarinetist, picked up by Turkish Roma musicians, and then being revitalized throughout that area. That question about religion and music is extremely complicated. There is a simple, straightforward ideology that music is forbidden or haram, according to Islamic theology. But it's much more complicated than that. If we look through the Quran, there's no reference to music at all. Where we have references to music are in the hadith, or the recorded sayings of the companions of Muhammad. And there, if we are to count them up, there are as many positive statements about music as there are prohibitions. Now, in common understanding, certain practices like chanting the call to prayer, note I didn't say singing, because in the local languages it's called chanting or reading, because it is viewed as not music, even though when you listen to the call to prayer, the muezzin is often using local melodic modes from the particular tradition, whether it's in Turkey or in Egypt or in Libya or Pakistan, for example. And modes are used in the recitation of the Quran. There's actually prescriptions for certain kinds of, let's see, salah, which is the announcement of somebody's death, is supposed to be in a particular maqam, for example. So already it's a little bit blurry. I would say also that music is viewed as so powerful that there are prescriptions in order to protect people and to channel its power. In everyday life, once the call to prayer sounds, all the music stops. And in times of tragedy, music is not officially allowed to be performed. Now, one of the other factors is, I was just talking about Islam, but we know that the birthplace of the Judaic tradition and Christianity was in the Middle East. In those traditions, there is a belief in the importance of celebrating words, prayers through music. Whether or not instruments are allowed is another matter, and it really varies from one branch within each religion to another. So I would say that the commonplace ideology that music is forbidden in Islam doesn't quite hold water, but music is treated with great respect and reverence for its power. In the Middle East, there are many different kinds of genres, even within a given country, marked by ethnic group, linguistic groups. I've been talking about Romani groups, for example. And in Turkey, they have their own set of rhythms that are known to be Roma rhythms, and their preferences for types of melodies and dance styles. You can go from one region to another and find a great deal of variety. So for example, you would go to Turkey in the southeast, where there's a stronger influence from Kurdish culture, or Assyrian, which is an old branch of Christianity, Arab communities, and you'll hear different kinds of music in those languages and with different instruments and different styles. And you'll find some traditions that'll cross borders. So for example, with Romani communities, there are tunes that travel along ethnic lines that reinforce this sense of belonging, even when there are these national boundaries. That's a great question, because I see technology, actually all of these are technologies. And my using my voice in particular ways is an example of technology. So it depends on what we think of as technology. If you mean something like, let's say, video and various forms of media transmission, I would say that, in fact, there's a dynamic tension between musicking practices and the affordances of technology. I'll give some examples. Recently in Turkey, I've been noticing a kind of sonic warfare going on with amplification. Bands are now seeking to increase their prestige by having towers, multiple towers of speakers. And then each musician is now using various kinds of enhancement. Rather than just using a mic, they're using a pickup. That's what this is for. And this pickup goes into a sound device. I've seen musicians do things like turn down their sound really low when they're doing sound check, and then turn it way up when they're playing in order to be heard over the other musicians. It's very interesting the way that people's sense of musicianship has been changing. In addition, I've noticed more and more at Romani weddings the use of staging as if it's on a TV show. They'll have screens up. So during this loud, cacophonous, fulsome wedding where there's several hundred people there, you could actually just stand back and watch the screen of different people dancing. So I would say that technology is being included into this package of amplifying celebration and also the prestige of the celebrating family. In addition, there's been a tradition since the advent of video cassettes, the old VHS, of recording weddings, and then families would hold on to the recordings and they would use those to be able to check to see which family gave how much money during the presentation part of the wedding, because they are obligated to give back the equivalent or more to that family. So they also serve as documents. And now, of course, YouTube. Roma families, especially the women, watch Romani weddings even from other countries, from Macedonia, Bulgaria, to get some ideas about costumes, ideas about jewelry, ideas about music, new dance steps. So I would see technology as filtering in to the various kinds of celebratory and also prestige marking aspects of wedding rituals. That's a question I'm not going to touch. Why? Because I would say even if we find frame drums across different cultures, and this would be an example, and I would say that in many places, not just the Middle East, but into Central Asia, into Russia, and further west, frame drums are often a woman's instrument. But then the playing styles are so different, or the making of it. So, for example, as I mentioned, this is a Roma women's style instrument. This body is actually made from the body of a sieve. So if I turn it this way, you'll see, imagine that there's a screen here. And this was used to sift flour. Or you'd put your rice in here to get the dust and dirt particles out. And then what the women do is they would take the screen off, put a skin on this, and then in this case, there are jingles added to create a frame drum. So we do find many instances of household utility items being turned into instruments. Spoons might be another example of a rhythmic instrument that has this multiple use. But then when you get into the nitty-gritty of how the instrument is played, there are great differences. So for example, in Turkey, that's an example of a 9/8 meter that The striking pattern of this would be very, very different or non-existent in another place that also has frame drums. Once again, my name is Sonia Tamar Seeman. It's been an honor to spend time with you during this Music and Culture of the Middle East office hours. I look forward to sharing more.